Welcome to Momentous. I am Pastor Rebecca Great, the pastor and mission developer for Momentous and the host for our weekly podcast. At Momentous, we believe that God is present with us in each and every single one of our moments. We believe that our stories are connected to God's story and to one another's stories. We believe that this connection and relationship changes our lives and our entire world. Now, before we begin, I invite you to take a deep breath in and hold it while you count to 3, and then slowly release that breath. Over this summer, we spent our entire time at Sabbath Stops, at times designed for sacred rest, to reconnect with God and with those around us and with creation. Now, we did this because summer is a season where almost all of our schedules completely shift from what they are during the school year. And now, with most within our communities having returned to school as students or as teachers or as support staff or as administrators, and before we move on to our next podcast series next week, let's recap where we've been and what it means to move on. So for one final time this year, grab a snack, grab some water to drink, and stretch, and take another deep breath. Now, we started this summer by looking at what Sabbath means for us as we understand it, as a community that views it through the lens of being Lutheran Christians. Now, we know that there are many different faiths that hold to a practice of sacred rest to incorporate it in their rhythm of life. And because of that, there are many different variations of what this faith practice looks like when it's actually practiced by individuals and families and communities. And if you're curious about what some of these different practices can look like, I highly recommend Journey Films' recent documentary titled Sabbath. And I've linked to where you can watch that online for free in the transcript for today's podcast episode on our website. And then I'll also share that link on social media later this week. Now, this summer, we also focused on several different Bible passages from the Old Testament, looking at the roots of where the practice of Sabbath originated. We heard the story of Moses and the burning bush, where God shows up to talk to Moses, and the entire ground on which Moses was standing was declared to be holy, simply because it was where there was an encounter with God. And we also looked at several verses from the book of Leviticus, which is a book in the Bible made up almost entirely of laws and commands and precepts and ordinances that are given from God for God's people to follow. And some of those involve honoring and observing a Sabbath practice. Now, while we were focusing on these verses from Leviticus, which is not one of the commonly preached on or studied books of the Bible for most Christians, we once again engaged in the practice of Lectio Divina, that practice of sacred listening to discern what God might be saying to us through these verses we probably weren't familiar with. We also learned about the spiritual practice of breath prayers to help ground us and find some moments of Sabbath as we go throughout our days. And we learned about the practice of the Ignatian Examen, where we reflect on where we may have missed God's presence with us in the moment, but then noticed it at the end of the day as we looked back. Now, graphics that are outlining each of the steps in those spiritual practices are located on all of our social media feeds from the past few months. And then I've linked those same graphics in the transcript for today's episode in case going back and searching on our social media platforms is just hard, because sometimes it's hard. So they're linked in the transcript so you can find them all there. Now, I know that it feels so good to talk about all the things we have done and experienced together over the past few months, but that wasn't the point. We didn't focus in on the practice of sacred rest simply so that we could then brag about it afterwards to try to prove to ourselves or other people about how faithful we are being. The entire point of sacred rest is to connect more deeply with God, with one another, and with creation. And I'm curious about how you've done that. If you have had an experience where the practice of Sabbath has clicked, even for only a few fleeting moments, I would love for you to share that through a DM on our social media channels or by leaving a voicemail or sending me an email. And if it hasn't clicked yet, or the process of resting just feels like it's creating so much more work, that's okay. This isn't a practice that we fall into naturally or easily. It takes time for it to take root and grow, and I promise I am right there alongside you. I looked at my husband last night and I told him, there are too many big projects that need tended, and I'm supposed to be on vacation again soon. I'll just work on vacation so I can get caught up. And he just looked at me and said something along the lines of, or you could rest on vacation and trust that the work will get done. I heard a podcast about that somewhere. And I was chastened and realized that I still have quite a bit of learning and growing to do surrounding rest. So when I tell you you're not alone, I promise you are not alone. Now, one of the other big things that was created during the last few weeks of our Sabbath Stops was lifting up a set of practices and a resource to help equip families or those heading back into a structured school year schedule to continue to find moments of Sabbath during their days or their weeks or their months. And I've also linked both of those things in the transcript for today's episode in case you missed us sharing them on our social media feeds a few weeks ago. Now, friends, I promise that the work of engaging in Sabbath and sacred rest is a lifelong practice. Every single one of us will be drawn back into the frenzy of trying to be in all places at the same time and be present with every single person and to do the entirety of a month's worth of a to-do list in a single day. And having the resources that I mentioned in this podcast and having this community and other communities in our lives, all of those things, having them surrounding us and calling us back to the practice of Sabbath is actually God's voice that never gets tired of wanting to be in a deeper relationship with us. There is nothing we can do and nothing we cannot do that will ever change God's love for us and continuing to call out to us. So when the practice of Sabbath falls by the wayside, which it will, know that God is delighted whenever we notice that call from God, so that we can rest together and grow in our connection with God and one another and with creation again. I invite you to take a few deep breaths to help center yourself for prayer. A prayer for starting over again and again. God of newness and constancy, we love spending time with you. We know you are where our true home is. But my goodness, the things and the places and the people and the everything that needs tending is so loud and so pervasive and so persistent. We both know that I'm going to mess up again. I'm going to forget to rest with you. Keep calling out to me through my friends and my family and my community. And help me heed those calls quickly. And remind me that your love for me does not change, no matter how many times I mess up. Amen. Thank you for joining us for our weekly Moment to Us. We are looking forward to growing with each of you and are so grateful you are part of the momentous community. Thank you to our mission partners, the Southern Ohio Synod and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Their financial contributions and prayers have been instrumental in bringing our ministry into existence. Now, I have 2 announcements for this week. One is a reminder, and one is brand new. The first announcement is a reminder that our first in-person gathering will be on Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. We are going to gather at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at Charmar Ridge Park in Westerville, Ohio, for one step at a time. We will gather in the parking lot for some quick introductions and a short devotion before hiking the trail at the park. There is only one trail at this park. And that trail is well maintained, but make sure you come prepared for path hiking, not paved road hiking. And then after the hike, we'll gather in the parking lot to pray with one another before we head on to the rest of whatever is on our schedules for our Saturdays. Now, just this week, we set up a Facebook event for this. So if you are someone who uses Facebook and is following us on Facebook, please share this event on your pages and invite your friends to join us. We also have gotten a few questions about the event, about who is welcome at the event. All y'all are welcome. And yes, you can bring the whole family with you. And if you have a dog, dogs are allowed on this trail. They do need to be well behaved and get along with other dogs and with kids and with other people. And they do need to stay on a leash the entire time they are on the trail. I know that my husband and I will be there, and we will be bringing our dog with us because she loves hiking. So bring your dog if you have one who can do the hiking with us. Now, the second announcement is that next Sunday, we will be starting our next podcast series, Burning Questions. Now, earlier this spring, I asked the Momentous community the question, what confuses you about God, the Bible, Christianity, or the church? And y'all had some good questions. So some of the questions we are going to be addressing over the next series include, why are so many Christians jerks to one another or to people who are different from them? Why do some people get better after people pray for them and others don't? Can I be a good Christian and be in therapy? Why does the Bible contradict itself? So if you are a little behind on the Sabbath Stops series, this week is your week to catch up as best you can within your schedule and be ready to join us next week. Now, if you would like to support the ministry of Momentous, engaging with us online is one way that you can do that. If you are able to give financially, you can visit our website and find out more about how to donate electronically or by mailing checks to our Synod's P.O. Box. Each one-time or recurring gift combines together to ensure that the Momentous community continues to grow. Now, however you are engaging with Momentous, we hope that it means you are growing in your faith and noticing God's presence with you. Until our next podcast, remember to breathe deeply and that God is present with you every single moment.